Welcome to the Redeeming Stories podcast, where we share honest, healing-centered conversations about the moments that shape us and the redemption that continues to unfold. I'm your host, Julie M. Lane, and today's guest is Miranda Roos, author of The Empty Drawer and its companion journal. Miranda's journey is one of courage, emotional honesty, and the deep work of healing generational trauma and insecure attachment wounds. Through lived experiences, Miranda has discovered how our earliest relationships shape the way we connect, love, and protect ourselves, and how those patterns can echo through family lines until someone decides the cycle ends with them. In our conversation, we explore what it means to recognize inherent emotional patterns, understand attachment wounds with compassion, and step into the slow, powerful process of healing that can transform not only our lives, but generations after us. This is a conversation about awareness, legacy, and the quiet redemption that becomes possible when we face what we passed down and choose something new. Miranda, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. So, hi, my name is Miranda. I'm South African originally. Moved here almost 14 years ago now to the UK with my then ex-husband. I have two boys. The older one is turning 17 and the little one's just turned 12. So, always got my hands full. And I've got loads of animals, 2 cats, 2 dogs. You know, we've always got something running around the house.
Well, yeah, that would keep you busy. The title of your book, The Empty Drawer, feels deeply symbolic. Can you share the story behind it and what it represents in your own healing journey and what you hope readers will find there?
So for me, I came across the title because I'd been seeing a partner for about 3 years. And actually, ever since I got divorced, which is almost 10 years ago now, I'd never really made space for anybody in my life. So, you know, I'd had 2 longish term relationships, both were about 3 years, and only ever gave them one drawer in my room to put all of their stuff. So I think in some way I was also kind of, you know, you can come in, but you can't really come in. But I wanted them to be in and all in, but I was never all in myself, if that makes sense. Um, and I think during the last 10 years, I've progressed to become more soft, if that makes sense. So I've softened myself to a point where, you know, the drawer that the last boyfriend had, you know, stretched and overfilled into other areas. And, you know, there was a little bit of space in a cupboard that he was kind of using. And it wasn't, you know, it didn't make me feel terrible. And then, of course, things didn't work out and he left. And it was then, you know, because I hadn't made space anywhere else, but I'd physically made space in this top drawer in my dressing table, you know, chest of drawers. So for me, then I then had this drawer again, which was, you know, now what do you do with this drawer? And that's why I called the book The Empty Drawer.
Wow. I had no idea that was that story behind the drawer. I know that you have a deeper family story of trauma and abuse, and I was always connecting it to that story. So thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. You speak about healing and generational trauma, the pain we inherit without realizing it. What happened or what helped you begin to recognize those patterns in your own life and start breaking the cycle?
I think I subconsciously probably always knew that there was something, but you know, I think before you become aware that you've got any work to do, you always like, you know, it's not me, it's them. It's always everybody else is the problem, and you know, it's not me. And it was the relationship before this last one ended that actually made me have this, you know, realization that something was not right. You know, I'd ended it with him after he'd been cheating, you know, in the relationship. And it left me, even though I had always been leaned quite avoidant, it left me feeling really anxious. And, you know, I suddenly went through a stage where I couldn't imagine, you know, I'd broken up with him because I knew it was the right thing to do in my head. Rationally, I knew it was the right thing to do. But it was like I couldn't let go emotionally. And I mean, I guess part of it was also because I'd met him in COVID and we'd spent a lot of time together in the relationship. But I ended it and went to I got a recommendation to a therapist. And the first thing I said to her was, this is my life. This is my dad. This is my mom. This is my brother, is just like my dad. My sister obviously ended up killed by an abusive partner. And I said, and I have just realized that I'm choosing these kind of people, and tell me how to fix it. And of course, she kind of smiled and said, well, I mean, at that point, I didn't even know about attachment theory. And she said, well, it's not really something that you just fix. You have to do a lot of work and a lot of unpacking, and it's messy. And, it's, yeah. But she said, it's possible that we can do it. And the first book that she gave to me to read was The Emotionally Absent Mother. And of course, being the avid learner that I am and keen to learn and absorb everything, I put that on Audible, and while I was walking the dogs and was listening to it, and I don't even think I got past the first few chapters when I just had this epiphany, and I thought, yeah, I have an insecure attachment, because basically the book starts off talking about, how even in the womb you can feel this disconnect, and you're beginning to form attachments to your mother, for example. And I thought, gosh, I've got an insecure attachment. And the very next session I had with my therapist, I said to her, I've started listening to your book. And I said, I think I have an insecure attachment. I think that's what the problem is. And that explains all this, why my brother and my sister are like this and why I'm like this. And she just sat and smiled. And I said, did you know that? And she said, oh, yes. It was so easy to see. Literally, from the moment you opened your mouth, I could see. So that for me was really where it all started. And that was, gosh, 5 or 6 years ago now. And I've just, kept on absorbing all the information I could find out about it, and just, putting little bit by little bits in place and fixing little bits.
Mm-hmm. No, and I can identify with that. And I don't know if it's because of so much the time when our parents were born. I know my parents were Depression era babies and had very detached parents as well, and that inability to really connect with us. So thank you for sharing that piece. It's important for us to be aware of. You also mentioned your sister,
Yes.
and do you mind sharing a little bit about that story as well?
Yes, of course. My sister had been I mean, she was killed when she was 21, but prior to that, she'd been in one very long relationship, probably from, I mean, I want to say about 5 years odd. So I think looking back now, I obviously couldn't look at it with the lens that I have now when I was a teenager. But she very clearly also had attachment issues, and that's why she, attached to this one partner and then finally broken away from him, and then met this man who subsequently ended up killing her. It obviously was an abusive relationship for quite some time before he killed her. But yeah, I mean, that's, like I said, just proved to me that there were attachment issues, and she had chosen that partner because of obviously her attachment.
No, absolutely. I think so many of us stay in relationships for decades or
Yes.
repetitive relationships because of that attachment issue and that need to attach to somebody who perceives, or at least we perceive, that they're going to care for us and take care of us and emotionally support us.
Familiar.
Yeah,
Familiar
absolutely.
patterns, that make us feel safe. That it shouldn't make us feel safe, because, in my instance and my sister's case, it should have given us alarm bells and go, this is inherently not safe. It's the exact opposite of safe. And if I look at all of my past relationships as well, while they weren't physically violent, they all have this theme of abuse, control, coercive behavior, financial control. So they've all had that kind of element as well. But I've chosen those people because they felt familiar to me. And that's what makes it sad, is that we are going to keep doing this until you fix the root cause of it, which is you. If you look at the advice that they give to domestic violence victims, they say, they're not trying to fix the men. What they're trying to do is they're putting the women on courses to fix them, to fix us, so that we do not choose those people anymore.
Absolutely. And you were talking about being on this journey now for about 5 years, and that's probably about as long as I've been on my journey so far, as in taking care of myself and healing myself. I feel it's going to be a lifelong journey for me.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you feel about where you are in your journey and the work that you still have to do?
I wish I could say. I mean, I have days when I think, oh, I'm there. I've done so much, and I feel so righteous. And oh, look at me. I'm so good. I'm being such a great mother, being imparting emotional wisdom too much. But I'm not. Then something will happen, and I'll think, gosh, you just have so much more to do still. Every day, every day is a learning day forever.
No, absolutely. Yes, I completely agree. Many of us live our attachment wounds that started long before we could name them. What did healing insecure attachments look like for you? And I realize those are still unfolding, but what is that healing insecurity, and how did you begin to change the way you connect to others?
So I think for me, I I would say I'm what they call fearful avoidance. So I oscillate between being completely avoidant and then being anxious. So for me, it was trying to find a more middle ground and going, I'm safe on my own. I can make myself feel safe. I don't need an external person. And I also have a voice that if, where previously if somebody had said something which I felt was a little bit hurtful, or it hurt my feelings. Maybe you said that you didn't like my jumper today or my hair, and it's hurt my feelings. Instead of going completely avoidant and cutting you off for the rest of your life, which is what I would have done, because you've hurt my feelings, right? I can now say to you, oh gosh, is it really that bad? Maybe if I changed this, would it look better? But I can have a conversation about it now. So I think I'm more rational, and I think for me that is what healing your attachment is. It's about not coming from your anxious side of your brain or your emotional side of your brain. It's being able to speak from, I think one of the books I read called it the wise brain. So you talk from your wise brain and you respond instead of reacting. If I look at my 12-year-old, for example, when he doesn't get what he wants, he still very much reacts, and it's charged, versus then you look at, even as an adult, how I was reacting in situations. It was very reactive, where I think once you start the healing you become more aware of it, and you tend to think about it more and then go, okay, well, maybe they didn't mean to say it like that, maybe I'm taking it too personally. And you can look at the different, the whole picture. So what my therapist said to me was, you can't color in the whole picture if you can't see it. So only color in the parts of the puzzle that you can see. And that's very limited because that's the lens that I'm looking through. So, yes, maybe because somebody said I was overweight at school, now, if, you know, 30, 40 years later, if someone says I'm overweight, I'm going to be sensitive about that. But, it might not come from that. It might, and I'm using weight as an example. Obviously, I think if someone says you're chunky, then that's rude and they shouldn't be saying that. But it's almost like you're looking at it with this very limited lens, and to be able to respond, you have to be able to take other people's views into account, and why possibly have they acted this way, and why am I feeling the way I'm feeling by what they've done.
Absolutely. I think, wise brain, wise mind, it's constantly going back to refocusing. And for me, even, it's gotten to the point where if someone says something critical, I do reflect on it, but I'm now able to say, okay, I reflected, I thought about it. Do I want to take that information in? Is it something I need to change or do differently? Or is it, this is just a different perspective and I just move on from it?
Exactly.
So, yep.
And it doesn't get to you the way it used to, which would have been to completely break me down and have a few days where I'd be wobbling and going, oh my god, somebody doesn't like my hair, or whatever it is about me. Now I go, okay, well, you're allowed to think that. I still like this, and that's okay. We can be different. Or, you know what, maybe you're one of those people that's not going to be in my inner circle. you can be an acquaintance and I can still be kind to you and you can still be kind and courteous to me, but we don't have to be, completely in each other's space all the time. So you're going
I
to get
love
different people.
Absolutely. I love that because we're in a world now that thinks that if we disagree about something, we can't even relate to each other. We have to shut the door and move on. And those different perspectives really help us as people to just reflect and learn a different perspective. Maybe they do share something that we want to do differently. And that constructive thought process is so important to our everyday lives.
Yes.
There's something powerful about realizing that your healing can change not just our lives, but future generations. And I know I've spent, and I continue to spend, a great deal of time giving my daughters what I did not have. And they're in their 30s now, and now I get to watch them give to their sons as they develop in a way that is nurturing and loving and validating. What has it meant to you to become that point of transformation in your family line?
Well, I mean, it's so powerful to be able to be that person, because I can look at other children even and see, how their parents have clearly got, an avoidant or an anxious personality type, and you can see that spill over onto the child. And so many times, I mean, as I said, mine are 12 and 17. So the younger one I still excuse because I think, he's obviously got a lot more growing to do. But even at almost 17, my son can say to me, Mom, I'm so much more emotionally mature than everybody else that I know in my year. And he's just started doing his A levels with psychology, and he's obviously learning about all the attachment and stuff as well. So it's so interesting to be able to talk to him about that and actually know that what I'm doing is raising two emotionally secure children. I mean, I've always said to them, I don't care if you want to empty bins or wash windows for a living. I don't care, or be a janitor. Just make sure you're the best janitor that you can be, and make sure that you're happy. Because don't be a janitor and then come home every day and go, oh, I hate my job. I wish I wasn't a janitor. No, that's not what life is about. But you don't have to be the CEO or whatever big earner that you think you need to be, that society is telling you need to be, if that's not what's going to make you happy. Honestly, like I said, if you want to empty bins, happy days, go and do that. I've done a plethora of, vocations in my life, and, I'm almost 50 and still figuring out what makes me happy. But yeah, I think it's important for them to be happy, well-rounded people. It's to me that is success. It's not the money, it's not the fame, it's that you're happy.
Exactly. I know we live in a world that pushes and pushes and pushes our kids, and it's one of the reasons why I believe, at least, that we have so many mental health issues with our youth today is we aren't letting them be who they want to be or who they feel called to be. It's about meeting some kind of expectation that's societal driven.
Yes.
One last question for you. Or wait, maybe I've got a couple more after that. Emotional healing often asks us to sit with truths we've avoided. What have you learned about being emotionally honest with yourself, and why is that such an essential part of redemption?
So for me, I think I very much, when I finally sat with it, I realized, the patterns I kept repeating, the people I kept choosing, the way I kept abandoning myself to fit into those situations. Um, it wasn't comfortable, but it was certainly clarifying. If I look back now, there's times when I could look back and beat myself up about how I've bent myself to fit what people expected of me, partners expected of me for the last 20, 30 years. So emotional honesty, I think, forces you to see not just what hurt you, but also how you've showed up in that situation. And I think that's where redemption lives. I think, redemption isn't going back and fixing someone. It's about reclaiming yourself. It's the moment when you stop editing yourself to feel comfortable, And it's the moment you admit what you really want and you're no longer going to tolerate.
I love that. And I love the words, reclaiming yourself. So often, for people who are of a faith, a religious faith, they think of redemption can only be done by God. And yet how can we fulfill our purpose unless we take the time to reclaim ourselves and learn who we are?
And
And
who we're supposed to be.
absolutely, yeah. No, I think that's awesome. I haven't heard that phrasing, so I may use it in the future moving forward. Your book and journal invite us, or invite others into their own process of reflection and release. So, for anyone who's just beginning this work, what small steps would you suggest as a place to start?
So I'd say start small. Even if that's one sentence, I'm exhausted. This wasn't good for me. I think for a long time I was running and not listening to any of that, not even messages from my own body about being tired. I just kept, it all just kept getting pushed down, and I'd keep going on because somebody else was expecting something of me. So, even just starting small and saying, today I feel exhausted, I'm having a rotten day or whatever, and then just sit with it. And what does that feel like to me? Because it's not about, I don't think, changing and fixing your whole life at once, is it? It's a muscle, and it's about building that muscle up to be honest with yourself so that you can then call yourself out, when you're not being honest with yourself. Like I said, I didn't feel myself today, or I feel nervous when I have to go and speak to my child's father, my ex-husband, because I know he's going to have something to moan about. And so just one little sentence, and then from there it'll be a paragraph, and then from there, you don't, like, I think a lot of people would, I certainly would have gotten very overwhelmed if you'd given me a blank journal and said, just be honest with yourself, sit with your feelings. I would have gone, I have no idea what and in fact I think I did very much do that when the therapist would say, how are you feeling? And I'd be like, don't know. I feel like I don't know what I feel. I can certainly tell you if I'm feeling sad because I know I'm crying, and I'm happy, then I'm happy. But in between those, I had no idea what, anxious felt like, or I'm pulling away because I'm feeling rejected or something. I just couldn't have told you that. And that's horrendous at 45 odd years old that I couldn't do that, because those are things that I'm pretty sure I showed my children, or mirrored to them when they were infants, little babies, oh, you're cold or you're hungry. And then I would say it. Are you hungry? Are you this? Are you sad? When you are sad, then you do this. Nobody had ever done that for me. Nobody had ever, it showed me those feelings.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to share with us today, Miranda?
No, I can't. Not that I can think of. Is there anything else you wanted to ask?
Maybe how what were those first initial conversations with yourself? What were those first things you were identifying that you wanted to work on?
So I think for me it was, as I said, I knew I was feeling something in my body after I'd broken up with that previous partner, but I couldn't put I couldn't put a finger on it and tell you what it was. Now looking back, I can very much say I was 100% going, the feelings I was feeling was anxious, and it was making, wreaking havoc on my body. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I just felt on edge all the time. So it was just those kind of feelings, and then I think, for it was a long time of going to the therapist before I even cried. And I mean, I think she rejoiced a little bit when I did cry, because I would just talk about all of these things very matter of fact, and I kind of shed a tear once and try to hide it, and she was like, it's a good thing to cry, you're allowed to do that, it shows that you are sad. And then afterwards I left and I had a little cry on my own. But it was very liberating, I think, to be able to match how you feel and then rationally say to yourself, this is how you're feeling because of this situation.
That's powerful, and it touches home because I still won't allow myself to cry. And I
It's
don't know if,
horrendous that we're this age and we can't
yeah,
do it.
Yeah, my mother never cried. That just wasn't who she was. And it's a battle. I want to cry, but I can't allow myself to. And hopefully eventually I will. I just still hold so much in. So it's nice to know that someone has made that breakthrough, and hopefully I'll be able to soon.
I think it's about extending the compassion that you have for other people to yourself as well. Because I think so often, it's easy to look back and go, oh, yeah, I should have known better. I should have seen this, but to be able to actually sit here and go, maybe I should have seen it. Maybe a normal person, another person would have seen it. I didn't. And that's okay because you know what? It's helped me get from there to here. And that's a big step for me.
Well, and congrats on getting that step. There are some milestones I've done my best to celebrate as I can. But yeah, sharing that compassion, that self compassion, is a really tough place to get to, and that journey is long. So, Miranda, as we close this episode, I want to thank you for your time and for sharing with us. Your story reminds us that generational healing often begins with one person willing to look inward, listen deeply, and rewrite patterns that were never theirs to carry. And generational trauma, it may be inherited, but so is resilience, and we need to remember that. If something resonated with you today, let it be an invitation not to fix everything at once, but to begin noticing your own emotional patterns with compassion. Healing doesn't ask you to have all the answers, it simply asks you to show up for your story. So, again, Miranda, thank you for your vulnerability and with your wisdom. And thank you, listeners, for joining us in this space for honesty and hope. Until next time, this is the Redeeming Stories podcast. May you continue uncovering what has been hidden, releasing what no longer serves you, and and discovering that even the stories passed down through generations can be redeemed. Thank you.